I'm going to lead off this video on Rampart with a secret that will make some of you stop the video immediately and go off and play this game. This Famicom version of Rampart is not a port of the arcade game Rampart. Oh, it's licensed by Atari and Tengen, and it shares the core mechanic. But everything else is radically different. This is essentially Rampart 2, designed by Konami, and it is amazing. Rampart was the last smash hit by Atari games. Oh, they'll be around for quite a while longer, and have a few popular games, but Rampart was the last time they were this big. It's a game that has some very easy to understand principles. You build a wall around a castle, get cannons based on how much area you enclose, and then fire those cannons at ships that are trying to tear down your castle. It's a simple, engaging game that got ported to everything. But for some reason, when it came time to go to the Famicom, Konami took the already popular game and went, hey, let's make this better. The first thing you're going to notice when starting a game of Famicom Rampart is that there's 4 different game modes. Each of them has you take part in a campaign, clearing a series of stages until you wrap up the story. You have a tutorial that takes place in a World War II setting, easy mode with a fairy tale concept, normal mode which is swords and sorcery themed, and hard mode which is set in the Sengoku era. All stages have the same basic gameplay loop. You have a starting fortress, which usually isn't actually a fortress, and then put down your attackers. Once that's done, you go to the attack phase. This is where the big damaging enemies spawn in, and they'll lob attacks at your walls, as well as sometimes just walk right through them. These monsters appear at the edge of screens, and so if your walls are at the edges, they can appear right on top of those wall segments and destroy them. You move a cursor around and hit A to fire your guns at them. And while you can destroy those attackers, your guns are also useful for other things during these segments. There's tiny monsters that accumulate on the map that you'll probably want to shoot up, and your shots can destroy your own walls. Why would you want to do that? Well, because sometimes you need to clear out space to make it easier during the building phase. The attacking phase goes on for a certain amount of time. How long depends on what stage you're on. And once that's clear, you get a status report letting you know how many points you have, as well as how many potential attackers there are remaining, and how many more turns the stage will go on for. In the building phase, you need to enclose things. Pressing A will place the wall brick that you're manipulating, and pressing B will rotate it. When time runs out, you have to have at least one fortress enclosed. Otherwise, it's game over. Walls have to be placed on clear terrain, and a lot of stages will be filled with blocking terrain that'll get in your way. Plus, you can't build on your own gunmen, cannons, or whatever you shoot with. During the building phases, you'll also have these tiny enemies spawn in, and they'll randomly walk around all over the place, mainly trying to get to any uncontrolled fortress to destroy it. You can't build on top of them either, and that becomes a real challenge because they have a bad tendency to stand in the gaps that you need to fill in. The small fries only move during the building stages, and the big guys only move during the action stages. But you can shoot at either of them during combat, and if you enclose either of them during the building phase, they get destroyed. Some stages also have things that you can collect by enclosing them, like this treasure chest. When time runs out on the building phase, you get a little bit of extra time to place your last brick. And then it's back to the status screen where you get points for enclosing territory. You clear stages by getting enough points, and the primary way you do that is by enclosing area, but you also get points for destroying enemies, and completely defeating groups so that no more will spawn. There are a few different styles of enemies to be aware of. The whirlwinds are indestructible, but they destroy terrain that couldn't be destroyed otherwise, which makes them really useful. Yeah, you might have to rebuild more of your walls after they pass through, but you're always going to have more space to do it. The worst enemies to deal with are the ones that turn into permanent terrain when they're destroyed. They're going to box you in further and make rebuilding your walls even harder. Another challenge is that while the building mode parts initially start out simple, as turns go by, more complicated pieces appear. So it's easy to rebuild your castle initially. But 5 turns in, you might have a real challenge placing a part, or finding something that can fit into just that gap. You're given a password after you clear any stage, and there are infinite continues. Another feature of Famicom Rampart is a 2-player versus mode. Both players choose a starting spot, set out another fortress that they can capture, and then take turns shooting back and forth at each other as they try to collect more territory. Rampart is one of those Famicom games that isn't especially well known even in Japan, but the people who do know about it really seem to like it. I couldn't find a negative comment on it, although I couldn't find many comments on it. Obviously, I think Rampart on the Famicom is amazing. Adding obstacles to the building phase gives the game more tension. You're not just hunting for the perfect part, you have to consider what's going on around you. Giving Rampart distinctive stages adds more variety to the game, and it's a real challenge. Yeah, there's some randomness to whether or not you get the part you need, but there's usually something you could have done differently that would have let you be able to build. Maybe you shouldn't have been trying to take out those guys and instead clearing out your own walls so that you'd have space. After all, you could always enclose them later to kill them. And there's multiple viable strategies here. Grab as much territory as you can. It'll net you the points, but it'll be tough to rebuild after the action stage. Maybe concentrate on getting rid of the enemies. You won't get as many points that way, but it'll make your life easier later. Or do you make a mad dash for the goal on stages with capture objectives? I like the original Rampart, but Konami's Rampart takes those concepts and puts them on a whole nother level. It's one of the best games on the Famicom, and I think it gets overlooked because it shares its name with one of the most ported games ever.